Welcome back to another episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I'm Ray.
I'm Chris.
And this week we're going to be looking at the Battle of Elizabethtown. Now, the Battle of Elizabethtown is something most of you have probably not heard of. And after all, this is a podcast called History You Didn't Know. So I'm going to sort of turn it over to Chris, and he's going to talk about a little bit about Elizabethtown and Bladen County, which are in North Carolina. And then we're going to talk about some of the lead-up events that brought about the Battle of Elizabethtown. Then we'll talk about the battle itself. So, Chris, tell us a little bit about Elizabethtown and Bladen County, North Carolina.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, first of all, to let our listeners know that, we're here at Bladen Community College, here in the heartland of Bladen County. And Bladen County actually formed in 1734, kind of a break-off from New Hanover County, and given its name thanks to a plantation owner who was an English commissioner of trade and plantations. His name was Martin Bladen. And it's interesting. Last time when we were talking about the Battle of Morris Creek, we talked a lot about the Scot-Irish and the Highland Scots, and that they settled here. But we also believe that some of the first inhabitants of Elizabethtown, Bladen County, were the Waccamaw Indians, who had some establishment that was here. But if you drive through Bladen County and you've come to Elizabethtown, you'll see a sign that says that Elizabethtown is the mother county. And, I find that interesting because out of 100 counties in North Carolina, at some point in history, 55 of them were part of Bladen County. Part of this area that we now call the county seat, Elizabethtown. So, many people, Ray, will talk about, well, why was it named Elizabethtown? And there's a little interesting history that it could be that it was named after Queen Elizabeth I, who was of England, or that it was also named from the owner of the land who had established this place, his sweetheart, whose name was Elizabeth. So regardless of who it was, we're here in Elizabethtown. This was a hot spot in 1781 for the Tories. The Tories were basically, the ones who were the Loyalists. Just as a reminder to our listeners that the Loyalists were in support of the king and did not favor separation. And so here we are in Bladen County, right near where we are located today, where in the 1780s, during the Revolutionary War, there was a hot, deeply divided relationship between the Tories as well as the Patriots.
Yes, and a lot of our listeners may not be familiar with Bladen County, but they're certainly familiar with some of the names, if they're familiar with the Revolution, the American Revolution, of some of the people who passed through this area. We need to sort of think back earlier, 1781. In fact, we go back to May of 1781. General Charles Cornwallis, he and his British soldiers are there at Guilford Courthouse. And they win, but it was a very expensive victory in the sense they lost a lot of men. And he needs a place for his soldiers to recuperate, to be resupplied and all that. So he heads down southeast to Wilmington, North Carolina. And on his way to Wilmington, of course, where does he pass through? He passes through Bladen County. In fact, where we are currently sitting, where Cornwallis passed through, is probably less than 5 miles away. That he passed through this particular area. And as Chris said, this area was a hotbed for Tory activity in southeastern North Carolina. And after Cornwallis passes through the area, of course, the Tories in southeastern North Carolina, and especially here in Bladen County, and they sort of ruled Bladen County, they were really emboldened and began to take action against those who were Whigs, against their Whig neighbors.
Yeah, and I would, to talk about, we're recording this in 2020 during the end of a presidential election. We find that in our society today that there's a lot of political dissension. There's a lot of individuals who are on one side or the other. And even during this time in 1781, you have a lot of dissension among, as you just said, neighbors. If you think through this, we have the Tories, these loyalists to the king, who were determined to let their neighbors know that if you were a patriot, your view was unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Your ideas, your thoughts, it didn't matter. And before long, these Tories had overrun any patriot that was in Bladen County and had driven them out of their homes, driven them out of their land. And for some of these families, a majority of them who were positioned just off the river in a place called Sugarloaf, pretty much burned down their homes and sent them to Duplin County. And so forcing them to leave, all because of what their views were. So this was a hotbed, because you now have a group of patriots who are hungry, they are homeless, they only have the clothes off their back because they have been forced from their homes simply because they believed in life, liberty, and independence. That was a little different from what the Tories believe.
Yes, and absolutely. And, you know, we think about Bladen County being under control of the Tories, and the Tories basically launching a campaign of terror, if you would, against the Whigs in Bladen County. There were two specific men who were sort of in control of the Tory party here in Bladen County. That was a guy by the name of John Slingsby and another guy by the name of David Godden. And these two men, you know, they guarded the roads, they guarded the ferries. Like you said, they drove people out of their homes. But the Whigs, you know, to their credit, did not go away quietly. They formed their own militia here in Bladen County, which was commanded by Colonel Thomas Robinson Jr. and Thomas Brown. And a lot of them, as you said, went into Duplin County, and they put a force together where they were going to take back, or at least attempt to take, the town of Elizabethtown from the Tories.
Yeah, and so in late August, let's give our timeline. So it's about August the 27th, August 29th, somewhere around there, 1781, and you have a very large contingent of about 300, 400 Tory soldiers that have kind of encamped in Elizabethtown, who are kind of mining the area, guarding the area, and Brown recognizes that there's a contingent of troops that are here, and that this might be the opportunity that they could drive the Tories out, that there might be a chance for, I don't want to say revenge, but retribution to take place. And I find it interesting that this is where those lesser named people come into play in the grand scheme of things. Individuals that we don't hear much about, but who really have interesting stories and interesting backgrounds. And one of those was an individual whose name was Sally Salter.
Yes.
And, you know, we know of Sally Salter because of a rock monument plaque that is located there at the courthouse, where we find this heroine. And Sally Salter, you know, she had a lovely plantation out there along with those other individuals on Sugarloaf, and, you know, during this time of a great war battling, and she has an instrumental role to play in this. And there's a lot of, I guess, debate whether it happened or whether it didn't happen, but the fact of the matter is, the role that Sally Salter played was absolutely important, because what she decided to do is to become a spy for the Loyalists. And
for the Patriots.
Or for the Patriots, yes. She wanted to be a spy for the Patriots, and it was interesting how she's able to go across the Cape Fear River into the Tories' encampment.
Into the Viper's Nest.
Yes. And what did she sell?
She sold eggs. And, you know, the funny thing about it is, from what we know, she was never suspected. You know, she was able to walk around in the camp selling eggs, and along the way getting as much information as possible from the Tory camp as she could get. And of course, she takes that information back across the river to Colonel Robinson, and they use that to create a plan to attack the city of Elizabethtown on the morning of August 27th.
Yeah, and so here's this woman who, very just a basic, going across, offering some valuable food. I mean, you have to imagine these guys had been eating stale bread day after day after day, and I'm sure the sight, first of all, of a young woman selling eggs must have been very appealing to them, because probably one of a different meal that they could have. And yet, while she's selling the eggs, She's got her ears open. She's got her eyes open. She's observing the way that the camp is set up. She's got a good idea of exactly how many soldiers there are. And that allows her to go back, as you said, and to make reports so that Colonel Brown can go ahead and make his plans on at midnight.
Right.
And isn't it interesting? Because, you know, if people are familiar with Bladen County, the Cape Fear River is very, very wide.
Yes, and it's got a lot of strong currents in it. This was not an easy task to necessarily to cross the river. It's not like jumping across a creek.
Right, and the only way that they could get there was by crossing the river.
Right.
And, of course, they didn't want to get the flint. They didn't want the ammunition. They didn't want their guns to get wet. Mm-hmm. Also, all they had were the clothes on their back. Mm-hmm. So we have this image that about midnight, these soldiers stripped down to barely nothing on. They tie it into a knapsack, and they hold their guns, they hold their clothes high above their head as they cross over the river. Mm-hmm. And they have to do this quiet, stealth, so that they don't know that these patriots are coming.
And if you don't know the Cape Fear River, and if you're not in southeastern North Carolina, you don't. In August, it is hot. It is muggy. It is going to be filled with mosquitoes and snakes, you know, talking about water moccasins and even alligators in the Cape Fear River. So this is not, again, it's not like crossing a small creek or Washington's crossing the Delaware in December.
We wouldn't put our feet in the Cape Fear River today in broad daylight. We probably wouldn't. So you imagine these individuals doing that in the middle of a night with no other resources except what they had. And so what happens when they cross the river? When they finally get to the other side, doing it quietly, covertly, what's the end result?
The end result's a battle, what we call the Battle of Elizabethtown. If you go into downtown Elizabethtown today, there's a historical monument, historical marker to the Battle of Elizabethtown. Early in the morning on August 27, the Whigs are able to cross the Cape Fear River. They are able to attack Elizabethtown. And it's very interesting that what they do, because they are outnumbered. They're outsupplied, they're outmanned by the Whigs, the Tories, who were pretty much encamped there in Elizabethtown, have everything together there in Elizabethtown. But what the Whigs decide to do is they rush in and they sort of take to the right, and then they move over to the other side, all the while hollering names of prominent Patriot leaders such as George Washington, creating this illusion, of course, that there's more troops coming across the river than there actually were. More militiamen coming across the river than there actually were. And that created some panic amongst the Tories there on this side of the Cape Fear River.
And especially when their commanders are instantly killed.
Yes.
And when the Tories lose their commanders, you have the Tory soldiers that all of a sudden are looking, what do we do? Where do we go? And it's the middle of the night. Yeah. They then just scatter. Yep. It's extremely dark. So they start scattering. They're running. They're jumping into a deep ravine because they honestly believed at that point that it's possible that George Washington and who knows how many thousands of people are right there on top of them, and so they're scared for their lives. They have found themselves in a predicament, and they don't know how to get out, and nobody's there to offer leadership, which I think, once again, proves the importance of leadership. Yeah. That when you lose the chain of command, when you lose that person who is in charge, even though you've drilled, even though you've done it repeatedly, how do you respond? And I think that we see with these Tories that they flee in the directions, they jump into the deep ravine, which is why they call it Tory Hole today.
Yeah.
And we noticed that it was a quick battle. It wasn't a Yorktown. It wasn't a Lexington. It was a quick battle. But what we find very, very quickly is that 7 Tories are killed, including the commanders as well. And even though they did it quietly, the Patriots, how many did they lose?
The Whigs didn't lose anybody.
Nobody. I mean, they had like 4 that were wounded, but I mean, it is amazing how the Patriots were able to make this happen in the cover of darkness.
Right.
after having been told that your opinions don't matter, having been told all of these things, are coming across, and so it is just it's a powerful story. Mm-hmm. When you especially think that the story of how the battle begins is with a young lady crossing the river to sell eggs, which changes things immediately.
Yeah, a young lady crossing the river to sell eggs, and followed by a group of militiamen who were basically unclothed, poorly equipped, outmanned, outnumbered, but they're able to use deceptive military, I guess you could say it military, they weren't really military, they were militia, but this sort of deceptive strategy, they're able to fool the Tories, and they're able to win the battle. And in doing so, what's so important about this is, even though prior to this particular battle, especially following Cornwallis's move through the town earlier, the Tory stronghold in Bladen County is broke, and it never recovers after this. The Whigs are pretty much in control after this, and of course, that's going to change the dynamic here in Elizabethtown and in Bladen County.
And I think once again it just shows us, when we start reviewing the life of American history, the different people who play a role in it. It's not just Washington or Adams, but that it's common, ordinary, everyday men and women.
Yep.
You think about these 60 roughly soldiers who came across. They were just farmers. Mm-hmm. They were people who just lived everyday things, and they weren't properly trained military people. And notice that they're fighting against a pretty powerful group of individuals. But I also go back to Sally, and I think that the lesson should encourage that all women played a vital role in the American Revolution. And it's a reminder today that whether it's a wife or a mother, it doesn't preclude them from being a contributor, a key contributor to a significant event in American history. And I look at Sally Salter, and I say thank you for helping the story to play out and to be told, to remind us that ordinary people made the difference in the American Revolution.
Yeah, we both teach American history. We both teach about the American Revolution. And, we'll talk about the Battle of Elizabethtown, or what we talked about last week with the Battle of Morris Creek Bridge. We'll talk about these things because they're local.
Right.
Most people, in Alaska or California or even Virginia have probably never heard of most of these battles. So, like Chris said earlier, these are not Yorktown. These are not Saratoga. These are small battles, community battles in many ways, but they have big results. And someone like Sally Salter, who I'm sure never thought that, how many years ago was 1781, that we would be sitting here today, just a few miles down the road, talking about what she did that morning.
And to not forget the soldiers who were willing to brave the waters of the Cape Fear River, and who faced an overpowering army, did it with bravery and did it with resolve. And I just go back to this week having celebrated and observed Veterans Day, of just being thankful for all of those men and women who every day put on the uniform to defend life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness for us each and every day. It truly is a reminder that we have so much to be thankful for, and appreciating history, the things that we didn't know about history, but we should, because it is what weaves together this tapestry of American ideals, American values, but also the heroes from before that allow for there to be the heroes of today and tomorrow. So I'm thankful for Bladen County. I'm thankful for the Battle of Elizabethtown. And Ray, isn't it true? I mean, Torrey Holt Park's a really cool place to go and visit now, isn't it?
It is. They have done a really good job, the town of Elizabethtown. I think through some grants they received recently, they have done a wonderful job turning that into a park where you can go down and you can walk along the river. You can walk out in the woods, though I'd be careful in the summer, because it is still a wooded area with a river that goes through it. But it is a nice area, picnic areas to, I think churches sometimes will meet out there and all sorts of things. So it's a very nice area today. And you sort of have to remember when you're down there that, you know, a number of men died there because, you know, of this particular battle. It wasn't a pleasant place to be in that August of 1781.
And you're able to see the ravine aspect
Yes.
of it, and how you, if you'll go there and just picture that it's night, just picture that you're in camp there. You've got the river, and you've got a very steep hill that takes you to the actual Elizabethtown. And so you just imagine, you think you're protected. You think there's no way that anybody can get to you. And then in the middle of the night, all of a sudden,
panic, you run off the side of that ravine.
That's exactly
You know,
right.
you go out in Elizabethtown today, downtown Elizabethtown, the old part, and you can go behind the shops there, and it's just a little ways,
Right.
and that thing drops off like, and it may have been steeper back then, who knows?
Right.
And that thing just drops off, and the woods and the darkness. I mean, there was just, I mean, that'd have been a horrifying thing.
Yeah.
It really would have been.
Hey, this is our 4th episode that we've done, and I don't know about you, but I am enjoying it. And
Absolutely.
I hope that our listeners are enjoying it as well. We'll be honest, we're just two historians who love talking about history. We love researching kind of things of the past and how they relate to the present. So we want to thank you so much for taking the time to listen today, and we encourage you to reach out to us, give us ideas, give us some topics that you'd love for us to talk about. We're thankful for Miss Jeannie and for all the work she does behind the scenes with her sound and with the web images and all of that information that's being portrayed. And Ray, maybe one more time, can you tell them how they can find this website or this podcast so they can pass it on to others?
Yeah, absolutely. We're available, of course, on Sounder. We're available on Spotify. We're available on YouTube and Twitter, and we're going to be adding more as time goes on. We're also available on Google Podcast as well. So we're going to be adding more and more as time goes on, where different people can listen to us on different platforms.
And thank y'all so much for taking time to join us today. We hope that it's been as informative to you as it was to us. And just remember that this is history that we should know and that we should go out and tell others. And we look forward to talking to you again real soon.